Senior advisor Elon Musk announcing the Department of Government Efficiency's new target. The next one up, he says, will be for the department, will be looking into elected members of Congress who have become multimillionaires during their time in government.
Let's just say that there's a lot of strangely wealthy members of Congress where I'm trying to connect the dots of how did they become rich while earning, how'd they get 20 million if they're earning 200,000 a year? It sounds, nobody can explain that. So something's, yeah, we're going to try to figure it out and certainly stop it from happening.
Kennedy? He's got a point. Do the math.
No, he has a lot of really important points. And one of the most entertaining things last year was following the Nancy Pelosi stock tracker. And there were several funds that popped up based solely on her stock trades, which outperformed all the index funds by quite a lot. And, you know, it was very odd because Paul, her husband, would make these curious trades, whether it was Visa or Broadcom or NVIDIA. And all of a sudden, you know, a week or two later, there would be big news with all of these companies that directly benefit him. Yeah, I mean, he must be psychic.
Yeah.
Like, remember Miss Cleo?
Yeah.
We need
just
Paul
hanging out.
Pelosi
Like,
on the Psychic Friends Network, at least giving stock advice, because, man, that guy bats like 17,000. They have to have a new scale for him.
And correct me if I'm wrong, you know, this is not the first time this has come up, okay? And in the House, Nancy Pelosi and others didn't want to vote for anything that would have culled some of this or at least held accountability among lawmakers.
No, they'll do everything they can to make sure that they're not held accountable for this. And I laugh because a couple years ago, Nancy Pelosi was so good at trading, she beat every major hedge fund in America.
Yes.
With like staff of hundreds of researchers whose only job is to find like the golden ticket on a stock trade and some technology that's going to explode. Nancy Pelosi's sitting back in her office and she's like, yeah, I'm going to do that one, and it's just going to hit gold yet again.
So making Kennedy's point, they're both clairvoyant, Mr. and Mrs. Pelosi.
You look at this, and it's unless you're just stupid, it is very clear that the system's broken at the bare minimum. Number two, you'd have to be the dumbest person in the world to think that the people in Washington are this good at trading stocks. And by the way, none of them were good at it before they got to Congress. Like, that's the other point. Like, let me see your stock trades before you became a member of Congress. Were you hitting 143% earnings per year in your portfolio before you got there? And I think, look, I sat down with Elon Musk at the White House a couple weeks ago with Senator Cruz, and we interviewed him. And this, you could tell it irritated him. He's a data guy. He was actually, I think, honestly angry over it because it's such an abuse of power.
Right.
And so he's like, I'm going to ask questions. And to people in Congress, there are Republicans that do this too. There are Democrats, a lot of them, they outperform the Republicans if you look at the weighted average for last year. But his point is, if you got nothing to hide and you're doing everything normally, then don't worry about this and me looking into it. And the others, you're on notice because they deserve to get nailed.
Look, that phrase about if you've got nothing to hide, that's immediately what I thought of when I saw the story today. I'm like, well, who would have something to hide more than the woman who said, Nancy Pelosi, you'll see what's in the health care bill when we pass it.
Yeah.
Like, don't read it now. Wait till it passes. Now I kind of wonder what they passed in terms of their cash.
So Fortune and many other mainstream outlets cited this report from Unusual Whale, and they looked at all of the open source data for Republicans, Democrats on their stock trades. Both Republicans and Democrats outperformed the S&P averages. So how is that possible in Congress? The interesting argument that I read, though, was from Bob Barr, former congressman. And he said, look, there are real questions. He actually pointed to some of the Nancy Pelosi trades that raise questions that we need to be asking. But that should not be used as a vehicle to ban all members of Congress from trading stocks. He makes the argument stocks are the best way to build your financial future. Do we want to deter people from public service by saying you're just barred forever from trading stocks? Let's enforce legislation we have on insider trading and make sure it doesn't happen. There are real questions with Nancy Pelosi and her portfolio and the stock tracker. Who knows? Maybe her husband's just a great venture capitalist. But don't ban people from building wealth when they are serving the country.
So the one pushback that I would make on that, though, is they will always have more access than the regular investor. Like, they take off the records, and maybe some of that stuff doesn't stay off the record. I can't say. I'm not in those rooms. But it seems like they have an advantage anyway. Maybe it's not a lifetime ban, but certainly while they're in Congress.
Well, and I think that's what Elon Musk is going to be looking at, which is essentially whether the advantage has been legally used. And at what point does the advantage become unconstitutional or straight up illegal? You know, and I want to point out sort of the backdrop. So as you pointed out, the Stock Act, that passed in 2012. And it's pursuant to that act, which is why all of these Democratic and Republican lawmakers have to publicly disclose in what they invest in. And then that's why the Nancy Unusual Whale Subversive Fund and then the Cruz, which is the Republican one, why they have the information to then trade based on the stocks that the lawmaker and their spouse have traded on. NVIDIA was $1 million gain, by the way, for the Pelosi family. So
$1 million, that's a lot of money. We should all be a little bit like, that's a lot.
That's a lot. And the second distinction is the existing wealth as these Congress people entered Congress, because many of them obviously funded their own campaigns, right? They came into it as the founder of such and such, the founder of the such and such. The question and where the spotlight should be are those that have been a humble government worker for all of these decades and yet have these multi-million-dollar homes and their spouse is not the source of that wealth. So I think there's a lot to uncover here. And I think the legislation as stands does not account for the sort of bad taste in our mouths that we are left with when we learn about these stock trades that these members and their spouses are going through.
And that's what Elon Musk is asking. Like, how did you do it with this amount? How did you get here? And one last point that I am curious about in all of this is, with all of that money that they have, because you talked about elections, who's making sure that didn't get funneled back in? Is that a problem? Is that a conflict? I mean, if you're able to raise that kind of cash, yeah, you'll beat anybody pretty much.
Look at AOC and Ilhan Omar. I mean, they face questions about that very
Jasmine Crockett has a lot of questions about her finances.
To put it in perspective, I had a congressman.
Late great Cori Bush.
Yeah, I had a congressman say to me the other day, he said, it's amazing that people in Congress who used to be CEOs of companies make more money being a congressman than they did when they were the CEO of a company. That's how broken the system is, was his point.
Well, they are playing with our money, aren't they?
I mean,
to some degree.
You're a CEO and you made less than you do when you're making $147,000 in Congress. That's a pretty good gig.
Well, I guess we'll have to find out what's in it when never mind.
Irritated. Irritated. Used as a vehicle. Used as a vehicle. Deter. Deter. Distinction. Distinction. Bad taste in mouths. Bad taste in mouths. To put in perspective. To put in perspective. Connect the dots. Connect the dots.
If you enjoy this content, please consider subscribing to my channel to stay up to date with future videos. Thank you for watching.